This is ogforums.com Real Talk, an unfiltered, independent perspective on Acumatica Cloud ERP. My name is Tim Rodman, and I want to mention three things in this pre-recorded intro before we get started. First, thank you to our sponsors. Our first sponsor is Paya. Paya offers Acumatica users a suite of industry-leading payment orchestration tools. Far beyond native Acumatica payments, Paya enables EMV NFC terminals for countersale. They offer a frictionless customer portal through their click-to-pay solution, and they support most e-commerce platforms and point-of-sale solutions used with Acumatica, such as One Retail and AcuPOS. And best of all, omni-channel reconciliation is available for all their solutions. Our second sponsor is DataSelf. DataSelf Analytics is a revolutionary reporting solution that enables organizations to make the most informed decisions faster and easier than ever. It uniquely simplifies business intelligence, empowers anyone to build and access dashboards, and delivers critical business insight when and where you need it. Our third sponsor is Aldrich Web Solutions. Are you a distributor using Acumatica, yet struggling with an e-commerce fit? US-based Aldrich Web Solutions out of Marion, Illinois, has 2 decades of experience helping distributors find success online. Our team of experts built the integration, creating websites that work effortlessly with Acumatica. With our reputation for swift customer service and meticulous attention to detail, we are the perfect fit for distributors needing online solutions. Please take a minute to support this podcast by clicking each one of the sponsor banners located at augforums.com/sponsors. Our sponsors track clicks, and every click helps to support this podcast. The second thing I'd like to mention is that I'm always looking for victims. I mean guests. If you use Acumatica in any capacity, no matter how small, I'd love to talk with you. Check out augforums.com/podcast and click the link near the top of the page to learn more about being a guest on the podcast. Third and finally, I'd love to see you listed on my Rolodex. Check out augforums.com/Rolodex to find out who else is using Acumatica and read the instructions at the top to see how you can add yourself to the list. All right, that's it for the pre-recorded intro. Let's get started. Today is Friday, February 9th, 2024, and this is episode number 125. You can find related links on the episode page at augforums.com/episode 125. Today, I'm talking with Adam Leski from Trailed about accounts payable automation that works in the real world while protecting your business from fraud. Mouthful there. Adam, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Tim, for having me along. I'm thrilled to be on the Acumatica AUG Forum podcast with you. It's been a life ambition of mine since I've been in the Acumatica world or MYOB world in the Australia region since 2013. I've been listening to these podcasts. I cannot believe we're up to this many episodes, Tim. Congratulations. But I'm thrilled to be here. I feel partially famous in the Acumatica world. So thank you for having me along.
Yeah, I can't believe it's up to 125 episodes either. I guess it's been fun enough to keep it going for me, and especially on the heels of Summit, I think other people appreciate it too. So, yeah, thanks for joining me. And before we dive into what it is you do, let's get your brief origin story. I like to do that with all of our guests. Maybe you could tell us where you grew up, where you went to school, and how did you land in the world of mid-market ERP?
Absolutely. So, yeah, as you can tell from the funny accent, I do actually live in California these days. But from the funny accent, I grew up in Melbourne, Australia, so very much on the other side of the pond. I'd been working. I got my first job in the ERP world with MYOB, which is an OEM reseller for Acumatica in the Australia and New Zealand region. I was there for many, many years, and I saw some of the challenges that customers had around AP efficiency and how do they make things easy and streamlined, but how do they also make sure that their business is paying the right suppliers and the things that they're going through their companies are going to, are being paid and processed to the right place. And so I met my two co-founders who also managed, family businesses and operations, and they had a couple of incidents along the way in terms of the accounts payable process, in the sense of they were sitting there at the end of the process with a number of AP staff in their businesses, and they'd sit there with an ACH or payment file or check file, and they'd be sitting there and saying, "Well, I've got a $4 million pay run this week. How do I know whether this is correct or if it's not? How do I know that I'm paying the right supplier and that the inventory has been receipted? How do I know that this is all correct? It's really difficult for me to be able to see, rather than just going down to the biggest payments and trying to look for, you know, investigate. How do I make sure that I have visibility on the things that I'm paying?" And so, unfortunately, not long after we were working through the idea, one of their family businesses were actually defrauded by a cybercrime called business email compromise, where the invoice had actually been compromised on its way into the business, and the bank details and the phone number on the document had actually been adjusted. It landed in the business and it looked identical to what a normal supplier bill would look like. Same logo, same everything. It looked really, really, really similar, except unfortunately the payment details and the phone number had been adjusted, and at that point the AP team didn't realize. They noticed, actually, luckily enough, the bank details, but they called the number and they phoned the number on the invoice, and they spoke to the supplier and they said, "Yes, it's our Western Australia office, not our Melbourne office. Can you please update the payment details accordingly?" Unfortunately, they didn't realize they were actually talking to the fraudster or the hackster of the impersonation, and the money got transferred overseas. And so, unfortunately, a business that was running in the agriculture space, very much a mid-market true business, with very little margins and high turnover, was put in a place where it was nearly shut down after 20 years of operation, due to hundreds of thousands of dollars being stuck in overseas in Macau and going through litigation. So at that point, we were like, is this the only business that's being impacted by not knowing what's going through their organization? Has my farm manager had a liquid lunch and just approved invoices and actually not even seen whether the inventory's been, receipted or accounted for? Are people getting invoices that have got excess supplier charges or potentially duplicate payments? How do we help monitor and help businesses solve the problem of not just making things efficient, but how do we help them make things secure? How do we give them the visibility at the time that they need it, to make the right decision and make sure that there's no problems out the other side? And so that's really where Trailed was born. We've designed it to essentially streamline, as you see in my background, automate and protect your accounts payable. And in doing that, it's really designed to sort of make the process efficient, but also give you financial control and visibility on what's going on, the same as you get with your credit card every day. If you think about it as a consumer, or even as a small business or a medium business, you would have a credit card, right? And that credit card has always on AI monitoring in the background. If you go to a local gas station and your card got stolen or swiped, and it gets transacted again at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're going to get an instant text notification from, well, it doesn't matter whether it's Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Chase Bank, is always monitoring that card. So what we've tried to do is we've tried to build that same level of banking security into your accounts payable process, to make sure you're not just relying on a diligent manager of diligent review, but you've actually got a system and AI monitoring that in the background to make it secure and make it visible at the right time, so that you're not paying suppliers the incorrect amounts, the incorrect invoices, or even being compromised in any way.
So I hear, a lot there, the protection part, the fraud part, and I definitely want to get into that. For me, like I don't even know what it is because I I know what accounts payable is, and I know what like paying bills is, right? So maybe we start there, because and maybe we can tell the story of I'm sounding a little bit like our first conversation that we had, which was I just pulled it up. The calendar invite was from May of 2022, so almost 2 years ago. And you and your business partner came through Columbus, Ohio, and took me out to lunch. Thank you for that. And we're just kind of picking my brain on the Acumatica space. Before I even continue that story, I'm going to pause that story. How did you go from MYOB? Like, okay, no, wrong question. When you were at MYOB, for people who don't know what that is, tell us a little bit more about MYOB and what specifically you did there. So you saw the need for accounts payable, but give us a little more of your personal background in MYOB and how it translates to the Acumatica space.
Sure. So I was in the MYOB space. I was in ERP sales. So I started in the very early days of selling Acumatica sites for MYOB when they partnered with Acumatica, understanding how those implementations would work, how the deployments would go, and really understanding and getting under the customer requirements. What were they using? Was it legacy on-prem ERP? How could we bring them to the cloud in a really efficient and structured way, and make sure the product, being the Acumatica solution, could really be wrapped and bent around their business process to give them the outcomes that they were looking for. So that was sort of where I started with MYOB. Having enough conversations with real customers in the real world, you started to understand some of the gaps around the accounts payable space, not only just from a data entry and processing point of view, but from an understanding of what an operational business deals with when they deal with inventory and stock, and what that means in terms of raising purchase orders and procurement and receiving inventory, and what does that mean for the incoming invoice that we're receiving, and how do I start to be smart about the way that we deal with that. And so a lot of that experience and background at MYOB enabled me to see some of the gaps in the general market, which has broadened us out to obviously now North America, and seeing the similar gaps in that since we all started operating here in sort of November 2022.
Yeah, so you were at MYOB, which I like the way you said it's just selling Acumatica sites in Australia. It's basically white labeled Acumatica. I know there's like specific stuff around Australian requirements that MYOB does, but the for the most part it's Acumatica, right? And so you were already familiar with the framework for years, and you then went to trailed an ISV for MYOB. Then you jumped into the US less than a couple of years ago. So I'll now go back to that Columbus, Ohio conversation in May of 2022, where you were talking to me about this fraud protection, AI, credit card stuff. And I'm like, all right, this sounds like another futuristic ISV who wants to save the world, but is missing the practical problems that are that I'm aware of. And so, I remember asking, well, okay, great. That all sounds cool. Can you like have your engine actually recognize a physical paper invoice and not screw it up? And you're like, oh yeah, of course we can do that, right? And I'm like, what? Really? Because at that point I had not seen accounts payable automation. Like, okay, scan invoice, teach the thing, where the fields are, and have it actually learn it and continue to do it correctly. Like, and you're like, oh, of course, we saw that problem a long time ago. I'm like, whoa, hold on. This is the United States here. We're like real backwards, country when it comes to technology. Like, really? So, anyways, I don't know. Was that a boring thing for you guys to want to even talk about that, or like, tell me what you were thinking at that time?
Okay, that was the best conversation I'd had in years when I was like, how are we going to do this in North America? I'm an Australian guy from Melbourne. How are we going to bring this solution to the Acumatica world? And we were very much thinking Acumatica first. So I'm thinking to myself, oh, Tim, I've listened to his podcast for years. I'm going to send him a message on LinkedIn and just see if he'll meet with me. So he turns around, and as Tim mentioned, he says, if you come buy me lunch, I'm in. I'll give you all the information you want to hear. So I literally turned to my business partner and says, we're getting on a plane. We're flying from Melbourne to Ohio. We're going for lunch. As much as that sounds absolutely ridiculous, that's exactly how it went. We sat down with Tim, and exactly as he mentioned, this all fraud and AI stuff, it's cool, but just get to the basics. Tell me, can you do the basics? And I remembered, I don't know if you remember this, Tim, but you literally took a photo. You had a handwritten invoice, and you said, "I pulled up my laptop," and you said, "Send it in. I want to see how it works." And I was like, "Tim, if this doesn't work, then the product doesn't actually stand behind what we stand for. So send it in, and we'll play around with it." And you sent it in, and it did its AI automation. And it took all the data out and all the things that you'd expect in an AP automation tool, if you're in a real business, and how you would want it to operate. And at that point, I think we were talking to you about three-way matching, and you're like, "Yeah, we do all that stuff." And you're like, "No way, that's nuts. Like, do you actually do it? Like, is in properly do it? Do you match on the description and the quantity and the unit price and the total at a line level?" Um, and we started going through this with you, and then we realized, how is this possible in the biggest economy in the world that somehow this problem hasn't been solved? Honestly, that was that light bulb moment where we're like, we understand the US pay with check, and that's a little bit backwards, but it's okay. They'll probably solve, it's a big economy. They'll probably have solved this problem many years ago. And then we realized with you, and then speaking to a whole bunch of customers that were in the region, that this was still a major problem in manufacturing, distribution, logistics, healthcare, across a general business across the Acumatica space. And it's sort of taken it from there. Now, as we've probably got, not probably, we have hundreds of customers using the solution in combination with Acumatica.
So you started less than 2 years ago in the official Acumatica space. You're already in the MYOB space, which it's the same product, and you now have give me a ballpark customer number, a little more specific than hundreds. Do you have
Three,
you know how
three
many?
hundred 315.
Wow, 315 in less than 2 years. That's amazing.
Correct. Yeah, it's been absolutely phenomenal in terms of the way that the customers have seen the product, and it's deep to my heart that we can really solve these customer problems in a real way. We're not selling them smoke and mirrors. We're not selling. It's that the product is standing on its own, and it's delivering what we always believed it would for the real businesses that the co-founders had come from, and that is more important to us than anything, and especially for me, coming from that Acumatica MYOB space, seeing these businesses thrive from an automation and efficiency point of view, but actually picking up things that they need to look at from a fraud and AI perspective. Like, every time someone messages me and says it's saved me X amount of time, or I've stopped this payment of $20,000 because the system was able to pick it up, I still get goosebumps, and how much that excites me as to being able to help these businesses in the real world.
Yeah, I picked that up in May of 2022, and I pick it up again now. My word would be passion. You can tell that Adam's got a passion for this. I mean, you can tell this is not just clocking in and clocking out on a job for you. You really like this stuff. Yeah, it comes through. It totally
My,
comes through.
my wife thinks I'm boring because I'm so excited about accounting software, but that's okay.
Yeah, but I would say boring too. I mean, I would say I'm boring too, but it's the passion's there. I mean, come on, this is accounting. Let's be real. It is boring, but if you can solve these problems, they're very, very real problems, right? And so, before we get to the fraud stuff, so I'll fast forward here to Summit, which just took place. Oh boy, I can't even remember now. Was it last week? Oh, it was last week.
It was last
Oh
week.
no. So. Um, I haven't published that episode yet. I actually, as you know, I went around in my blue wig and interviewed a bunch of people. I think it's going to turn into 2 episodes, but it's not published at the time of this recording. But one of the people that I interviewed, I can't remember her name right now off the top of my
I,
head.
I will let you know her name because she
Oh,
came
do you
up.
know?
She came up
Okay,
to
yeah, tell me.
me and said, "I met the Tim Rodman that you talked about," and I was like, "No way." And she's like, "Her name is Brandy, and she's from Riley Sales. She was one of our first Acumatica sites in North America." And she is just a character. She came up to me. She's like, "I spoke to the famous Tim Rodman." I'm like, "Really?" But anyway, there you go, Tim. You can tell the story.
Awesome. Yeah, I was really happy with how, just by roaming the hallway and randomly, like literally walking alongside someone and trying to get the conversation started. And then, they would actually, most of them would just say, "Oh, we can stop and talk." I was just happy to walk to their next location with them and chat. But I was amazed by like how many cool conversations I found. And yeah, happened to bump into Brandy was like amazing. And so people can go back and listen to that'll be either episode 123 or 124. But yeah, she talks about how she's actually using Trailed in the real world, and it does what it says it does, right? And it's just really cool that you've got over 300 customers now. And then I talked to one of them at Summit randomly who it actually works, right? So maybe we could dive in. I like diving into the details, technical details in this podcast. Maybe we could talk about, let's get to it. I know you want to get to fraud, but I'm gonna pause that as long as I can. But before we get to fraud detection, let's just talk about not even the three-way match yet. Let's just talk about an invoice comes in, you scan it. Your system somehow knows where the invoice number and the vendor is. What are you using to do that? Are you using some service on the back end, or is it some homegrown thing? Maybe
So
talk about the technical side there.
absolutely. So, from a technical perspective, when we first started the organization, we looked at all these different software providers. Microsoft have an OCR engine, Google have a OCR engine, all these big players have an OCR engine, and we tried to use them. And for some parts it was okay, and for a lot of parts it wasn't okay. In the sense of that, it couldn't really understand the level of depth and complexity on the invoices that a normal business would operate. So handwritten, multiple lines, multiple POs, all sorts of things. So we actually went out and spent a while building out our own OCR capability, with a classification engine embedded in it to be able to understand what every field and character is on a specific invoice and make sense of it. So, essentially it would extract the data, it would put it into a table, and it would say, is that a numeric field? Is that a string? Is that a character? Is that a date? And it would allow the system to learn and memorize what each of those fields were within the context of your specific business. Now, what we were able to build, which is really where a huge amount of the power in the platform comes from, is multi-tenant learning. So if you're a customer and you pay Walmart, for example, and five or 10 other customers on the platform also pay and deal with Walmart, it's going to increase the accuracy of the population of the fields and the data based on multi-tenant learning. But then it's also going to have an AI and machine learning model built into it for your tenant to say, okay, you may all these other customers that deal with Walmart pay on the amount of the invoice, right? But actually, for your business specifically, you may want to specifically pay just on the amount due after the prepayment. So you actually want to train it specifically for your business. So the system analyzes each of those fields that have been extracted from the classification engine, which is proprietary, and it allows the system to learn and memorize how you deal with your suppliers specifically within the context of your operation and your business. So it's not only just using the power of the platform, that's great for the first invoice, but then from the second invoice, how it's learning operationally how you run your business within the way that you deal with your suppliers.
I'm really glad you brought that up. So you call it multi-tenant learning. And so what I missed there though is, what does multi-tenant emphasize? Does it emphasize more that, hey, I know the population of all our different customers who pay Walmart, or is it more emphasizing that I'm able to learn and be unique for a specific company that's using Trail?
It is doing both. So it's saying, when I say
Okay.
multi-tenant, it's saying there's a multi every customer on the platform has a tenant. And there's a layer on top of that that understands, and it's part of the risk piece and how we built it in, but it's important because it uses also not only just the risk analysis, it uses the data understanding. And basically it's saying, if tenant A gets an invoice from Walmart, and tenant B and tenant C and tenant D, the improvement in the field population for tenant B, C, and D will be better than what it was for tenant A, because it's learnt what a Walmart invoice should look like. And so it's using the power of scale to improve the field population, to improve the accuracy, and even if that's different, like for your business, you can train the system to have machine learning on a specific piece that's specifically related to your business inside your tenant.
I love that you're able to talk to those level of details, that we're not just saying AI magically solves all your problems here, because that's something I've always wondered about, how you really get this to work in the real world. And I like how you said it's both, because you need that understanding of the AI engine that knows the population of everyone who's paying Walmart, but then you also need, and this is the part I've been more like, who actually does this? You really need it to learn how a specific company pays Walmart, and it's so you say it's both, and I guess that makes sense. Where you've got the learning that can see across all the tenants, And then you've got the ability to teach it just for your specific tenant, kind of like horizontally versus vertically. Now I'm in my organization and I can actually make it change what it does. And that's really important to me because Acumatica has demoed. Okay, I'm going to go back. Oh, I think 2017 Summit. I think we were in San Diego that year. Acumatica demoed an integration with a company I can't even remember. It was one of those, like, so much of the stuff that Acumatica used to demo at Summit, like it was it never saw the light of day, right? And so I'll never forget though, they demoed just the ability to teach an engine where fields were, right?
Mm.
And it was the most well received part of a summit that I've ever been at. Like there was so much chatter in the audience afterwards, right? Now that solution, I don't think they ever went anywhere with it, but now eventually they roll forward to, I can't remember, 2 or 3 years ago, maybe, when they demoed their own like AP document recognition engine, right? Same story, tons of chatter in the audience afterwards. And now that one's a real thing. You can buy that. And I'm pretty sure they're using Azure on the back end. You might know. Do you know for that one?
I'm using Microsoft. Yeah.
Okay. And so like it's 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 a real problem, right? That's why there's so much chatter in the audience afterwards. But I've tried using that and I could just be that I'm not doing it right, but I've tried just doing something as simple as scanning the same invoice in twice. And you like if it gets it wrong, you click on the where the stuff is and then it's supposed to learn it the next time. And I just have never gotten off the ground with it because I can't see it actually work. And so that's where that tech layer that you just talked about, that's got to be the difference in terms of why it can or can't remember something when I try to put the same invoice through twice. Am I on the right track there?
There's the machine learning part that's different between AP document recognition out of the box and Acumatica and Trailed, given that multi-tenant, single-tenant learning. That's a really powerful thing in terms of the field population and the system understanding what's normal for your business, no doubt about it. There's the other side of it is that and we're on the Acumatica price list now. So you can actually purchase us directly through Acumatica or through your VAR because we're on the Fulfilled by Acumatica program. And what's happened is that Acumatica have realized that their product is good for a certain subclass of customers on Acumatica. And then there's a lot of customers that have complexity and need something like Trailed. And so what I look at and what I see is if you're dealing with inventory and you deal with purchase orders and purchase receipts, Trailed is going to be the right pick for you. If you're using or if you're a retail business, you're using e-commerce, you need something basic to take care of, 100 invoices a month or something, then AP document recognition would probably suffice if you could get the machine learning working that you were saying you were having challenges with, Tim. So they're different horses for different courses. We've spent our whole existence focusing on how to solve this problem, and for Acumatica, it's a small piece of a much bigger problem that they're solving in the ERP world. So, they can't be specialists and brilliant at everything in terms of everything that they do. They're trying to focus on the core bits that everyone wants out of the ERP system, and they've done it to a point on accounts payable, and then they've looked to us to help take it from that point to wherever the customer actually needs to go. And I think it's a great partnership in that way.
Very politically correct of you to say it that way. So, but what I hear you saying there is that, okay, Tim, you didn't play with it enough to get it working. It does work in the real world. Acumatica's document recognition. We'll get to three-way match in a second, but my guess would be that it's so you can get it to work in the real world, but it's not quite as accurate. So maybe it gets it right 70% of the time instead of trailed like 95% of the time or something like that. Would that be fair
Yeah,
to say?
yeah. I think the accuracy they don't have it doesn't have the classification engine, right? So it's not going to understand and learn like the trailed system will. But it's better than keying it in manually. So if you had your option of keying all the data in manually or having AP recognition, I take AP recognition every day. But if my option was AP recognition or a system that actually understood my business, I'd probably take trailed. So it's totally up to what your requirements are and what you need.
Makes sense. No, I appreciate that honest like assessment of the tools and your different horses for different courses. Then it sounds like you were primarily drilling down on whether you do I would say whether you do the three-way match or not. Is that fair to say?
That's exactly what I was going to get to, and that's where I talked about inventory, right? So, if you're dealing with, raising a purchase order for $1,000, you've received inventory for $1,000, but then you get an invoice for $2,000. Our system is going to automatically link that together within the invoice number the invoice PO number being pulled off, and it's going to be line level matching to each of the inventory items and the PO receipt lines in Acumatica against the PO and check for any purchase price variance, any anomalies. And it's going to route it through back to the PO owner or the AP clerk if there's a variance or there's a problem. So when we talk about systematic matching, and we talk about not only just financial control, but we talk about how do we make that process really efficient. Because today, I can tell you there's a lot of businesses out there that are sitting there, yes, entering and keying in data, and we want to solve for that. But there's also a lot of businesses sitting there and saying, I've got the invoice on my one screen, I've got the receipt and packing slip and the purchase order sitting on another screen. And they're manually, literally looking at every single line, trying to match it up before they process the AP bill. That actually takes so much more time than keying in the data, or as much time as keying in the data. And we're trying to solve both of those problems at the same time.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, even if you just think about entering that data on the screen, you go to the AP bill screen, you got to put in the vendor first, of course, that's fine. But then you got to click the button to go look at purchase receipt lines, and you key in the PO, and then you're kind of scanning through to select the lines that you're invoicing off the purchase receipt. It's just it's your eyes are just constantly scanning, right? And whenever
Mm.
your eyes are doing that, it's just prone to error, and it's just time consuming, right? So the fact you guys do that in the real world, that's amazing.
It's amazing what it does for the customers. The technology is just there to assist the customers, and essentially, if it can solve the customer problem in terms of making their life easier, we're not trying. And I try and highlight this to CFOs all the time because they turn around and say, "I love the fraud protection, but how much time can I save?" And they say, "Oh, this is going to save us so much time. We can get rid of one AP person." And I'm like, "No, no, 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 no. Slow down. Like, you don't want to get rid of one AP person. What you want to do is redeploy that resource into other areas to help your business grow." So I think a lot of the time, finance people or accounts payable clerks feel that their job is going to be replaced. And I feel with Trailed, it's not about replacing headcount. It's about saving time on the AP side to help them have other things to do in the business that are more beneficial to the business's growth. But also, the finance team forget how much time approvers spend approving invoices, right? Via email, trying to find things. Is it correct? Is it not correct? And those people are actually generally paid quite a lot more than an AP clerk in a finance team. So you've got your CFO looking at every single invoice to approve because they're all over $50,000. With Trailed, it manages by exception. So because of that three-way matching process, it's saying, okay, everything matches. It's a low-risk invoice. This one's all good. But if it's a high-risk invoice and it's exceeding the normal supplier charges, for example, over a 12-month period, that's going to go to the CFO, and that's going to be the one invoice for the week that's actually important for him to review. And he's actually going to take his time on that one invoice rather than dealing with 100 invoices that you already know are perfectly fine, match the PO, and the inventory has been receipted. So I think people still think about this in the wrong way. It's how much time does your approvers cost to approve every document, and how can you have a system help support that with the same support being provided to the accounts payable and finance team?
Yeah, I like the way that you describe that for the CFO. It's basically your focus where you should focus, right? And for me, ERP is always about the 80/20 rule. I mean, companies spend 80% of their time on 20% of the transactions or less than 20% of the transactions, right? And that's just more speaking to manual processes and things like that. But you in a sense, you want them. Okay, so they spend 80% of their time on less than 20% of the transactions. You want them to spend like you want to get that 20% right. Like you want to in accounts payable, you want to make sure they're looking at the right 20% of the transactions, right? And instead of having to do a lot more manual review like you're talking about. So I get that for the CFO, but then I think it also applies, and I think you said this as well, to the lowly AP clerk who's you're sounds like you're advocating, and I completely agree with it. Don't replace the person who's processing AP, just uplift their skill sets to now be able to manage the engine better, right? Now instead of spending their time essentially managing paper, now skill them up so they can manage trailed, right?
Or do analysis. Like if Trail's managing, if you've got five AP staff and you've got, essentially you can cut the effort down to one AP person with Trailed, give the other AP people the ability to go and do analysis, find out how you can improve your cash flow, how you can do other things, move into accounts receivable, drive more sales through. Like there's other things that you can do with that resource without replacing or removing it. And so that's just a business decision. But I think this fear around that, you know, Trailed is only going to save time on an AP person is, or just a accounts payable automation is only going to save time on an AP person. I think that part is a bit of a lost fallacy, because actually the CFO or the financial director is getting paid a huge amount of money to run the business, and they're still doing approvals, and they're probably looking at 100 invoices a week, where we could get it down to three or four that really matter.
Yeah, I like to my analogy for that whole thing, like replacing a resource versus reskilling them, is is like an airplane pilot. So I'm not an airplane aficionado, so I don't know how true this is, but it sure seems like nowadays, like the pilot of an airplane mostly just sits there on a commercial airline because it's like flying itself most of the time, right? But why do they still exist, right? It's because there needs to be a person who's in charge of the lives on that aircraft, right? So maybe they're not doing as much technical stuff. There's still a lot of dials in that cockpit, but maybe they're not doing as much with those dials, but they're still at the end of the day responsible for those lives, right? And if you take that analogy into accounts payable, yeah, maybe you're not tweaking the details as much, but you're still responsible for the spend, or you're still responsible for the cost side of the business, and it, it just makes you more valuable. I think if I'm a pilot, I'm not going to replace uh, the pilot, because someone needs to be responsible for the lives on that aircraft. Someone needs to be responsible for our do we have everything from our vendors, essentially, right? And is it getting approved, and are we not wasting money, etc., right? And you can still someone needs to own that. There needs to be a throat to choke on that in the business, right? So you're not going to get replaced there. You're just going to be able to do more with less time, right?
I love that analogy. The plane analogies in the cockpit's brilliant, and it's exactly that, Tim. I couldn't have said it any better. That is exactly what Trailed is designed for when you're working around your ERP. That is exactly what it is. You can have autopilot, but you've still got to have someone there, at least one person, to manage making sure that the plane's not going to go down and be responsible for those passengers. And so that's, the system can do as much as it can in terms of the automation and security side, but we want to make sure that the right things are flagged to the right people at the right time, and that's part of that human in the loop but automation piece.
So the different horses for different courses, three-way match was the thing I was most excited about in May of 2022 in Columbus. Has that been for your 300 plus customers the main thing that they're interested at this time that gets them in the door, or how's that gone for those
It's a
300?
mix. It's the first thing that they think about and they go, oh, that's really interesting, I want to know more about it, and they do love that feature. It is a huge feature. Um, but one of the in Brandy, who spoke to one of our first clients, that wasn't the number one feature that she really loves it and she uses it, but it wasn't the number one feature that she was looking for. What she was looking for is that they had a bespoke system that generated, basically got the supplier invoices, and the supplier invoices would be in 50-page lots in a single PDF document. And so she was spending a huge amount of time, and her finance team was spending a lot of time splitting out the invoices one by one by one by one and keying each of them into Acumatica. And so we basically looked at that and we were like, Brandy, that's sort of nuts. Okay, how can we help with this? And so we actually built a recommendation engine that analyzed every single supplier invoice coming through via email. And it would actually recognize whether it was a multi page PDF document or not. And essentially, the system looked for the number of invoices and the number of page numbers in the actual single PDF document. And it would basically do a counter. and it actually automatically tells the finance team where the splits are, and it automatically splits the document into single invoices for processing. So when Brandy gets a 50-page PDF document from one of her suppliers with 50 invoices in it or 37 invoices in it, the system's automatically able to recognize where those invoices are, split them out accordingly, and process them as separate AP invoice files for processing through the automation platform.
From a technical perspective, that sounds simpler even than the three-way match, would you say?
It is simpler than the three-way match. Much
And you
simpler,
didn't,
actually, much simpler, Tim.
yeah, I would think it, but you didn't have that feature, it sounds like, but you built it for her.
Yes, we built it for her, and we found out that that feature has been one of the big things to drive people forward, because so many suppliers send multi-page PDF documents where they need them processed through, and unfortunately, that is one of the things where AP recognition was really struggling. Except there weren't enough customers to say that that's the problem. And as we were learning that it's not just the accuracy on the machine learning, it's also the ability to be able to deal with scan documents through with multiple pages and all, and even multiple attachments on a single supplier invoice. We're able to deal with that and process them as 5 separate invoices. So it's just understanding again the customer problem, what the use case is, and trying to wrap the business process around it.
I love that. I did not know that about that specific need, and now I sound like you. It's like, oh, that's a super boring problem, but like that you found it right is just shows that you're really doing this in the real world. I mean, you're really finding the real problems that your customers are having, and that's why you've taken off so much, I think. And then you've got the tech. I guess it is two things, right? I mean, one, you need to be able to find those problems, even the basic ones from a technical perspective, but then you do need to have the technical chops to solve it. And your team started with that. I mean, you guys had that on the ground floor, but then you've come in and been able to apply those technical chops to the real world. And that's hard to do. I mean, I see ISVs who are kind of on one side or the other. One, like they're really good at marketing to the market, but their technical chops are like, 1980s code. And then there's other ones who have this really amazing solution, but they can't like describe why it matters, right? And you guys seem to do both really well.
I think that's one of our really big strengths, is that most of our salespeople, you call them salespeople, I call them product engineers. Essentially, they have a product background, which means they understand technically, how SQL tables work, how you build dashboards in Acumatica, how you deal with generic inquiries. They understand enough about the ERP to be really dangerous, and they understand enough about it to work with the customer in the world that they operate every day. And so I think some ISVs where they really get stuck is they understand their product really well, but they don't understand the ERP system, and they don't understand the customer within the ERP system. And so they're trying to give them a product that doesn't make it makes sense to them in terms of the benefits, but it doesn't make sense to them in terms of their environment. And that is a big difference between selling a product and building and providing a solution. And I see Trailed as building and providing a solution, not selling a product.
Yeah. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, you're not just selling a vision here. Like you're able to actually show how that vision can work in your real life because you can connect the dots. You know the pieces. You know the ERP. You know the business. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, very cool. So, all right. So, three-way match. I still can't emphasize that one enough for me personally, but now also the ability to take one PDF and split it into multiple automatically. Anything else that's kind of service that from a basic level before we get
I
to
was
fraud?
I was
I've
gonna
no.
say, Tim, do you want me
Go
to
ahead.
open up the can of words on the AI piece? Look,
Yeah.
in terms of the automation side, absolutely three-way matching, multi-page invoice splitting. Depending on where you're using Acumatica, we have customers all over the world: Southeast Asia, South Africa, Canada, the US. But in some regions, they have major issues. They can't use the AP document recognition tool because it has issues with date formatting. So if you are using it in Asia, you're going to be doing day, day, month, month, year, year, for example. Same with South Africa. In the US, you're doing month, month, day, day, year, year in terms of your formatting. So you could be getting the wrong invoice date, getting the wrong due date if you're in the wrong region, and it's not able to be localized per region. So in those regions, we have there's a clear gap that they cannot use that core product in their Acumatica system. And so they very much look towards Trail to solve that problem. So localization with the solution is quite a big issue in terms of the Acumatica product, but it is something that, again, it gets you to a point, and then from that point, if you need more, you look at Trail as the solution for that.
So yeah, it seems like we're getting into simpler and simpler technical problems. So yeah, different date formats. You can do that. Yeah. What other ones?
We have a customer in Quebec who we do the platform in French. So we use our suite of we have embedded a multilingual capability, so we can deploy the product in French or in German, in Malaysian, Malay. There's a myriad of different languages we can operate in. I'm not sure. I actually don't know whether AP recognition can do that or not, or whether any other products have multilingual capability. But it's pretty important as we go into Canada, given that they've got French providence and that sort of stuff. So that's one big thing. Um, yeah, that's probably a lot on the automation side. I mean, the rest of it, I would say the real points of product differentiation aside from the automation is, as we said, the managing by exception. So our workflow approvals engine, hierarchical approvals, and being able to set that up out of the box. It's not taking you, 3 to 6 months to set up a workflow. You can configure rules within the key fields in Acumatica. Do you want every invoice that comes in that's got a purchase price variance to go back automatically to the PO owner? We can set that up. Do you want two levels of approval over a certain dollar value? Do you want to, filter by, a specific supplier GL code and sub account to route it always through to Tim for that particular supplier GL and sub account? We can do that. There's a lot of smarts in the way that the information gets pushed around the business in an automated and auditable, trackable way.
Very cool. So yeah, love. Yeah, it's just amazing that you guys are doing this in the real world. I'm still blown away because I guess I'm so backwards myself, being U.S. in accounts payable. Just used to it, right? Just like you just have to enter the data. So all right, so three-way match, all sorts of cool features we talked about. All right, I've held you off until the 43-minute mark or so here. So I think you're solving problems that people know they have, and you've gone from 0 to over 300 customers in a year and change. Now talk to me about the problem that people don't know they have related to fraud.
Before we get to that, I want to talk before we get to fraud, and I'm going to hold off on myself for 1 minute.
Ooh, wow. Okay, impressed.
Okay, because there is one more really crazy thing, and it is actually North America specific. Um, Once all that data has been automated, approved, three-way matched, and pushed into Acumatica, a lot of the time the AP team will prepare the payments and they'll generate their payment file, a batch payment, right? So they'll generate an ACH, a check, or a wire transfer. And at that point, the CFO is responsible for actually reviewing the file and making the payment. The same problem that Adam Late, my co-founder, had is how do you know what's correct, what's not? You're seeing a few $1 million in a batch payment. How do you know what's correct? So what Trailed is now doing, and this is really important, is a lot of customers were at that point were then printing off everything and basically providing an ACH payment or a check batch to the CFO and saying, here, sign off on each of these checks, and here are all the invoices I've just printed off out of Acumatica for you to basically tick them off. So you tick off the check, you tick off the invoice, everything, might have 5 invoices to a single supplier check, right? We were like, this is mad. You're going through this whole ERP process to automate and make things efficient and streamlined. Then you're going to the tail end of the process and you're printing everything off. This is, or even not if you're not printing off, you're still printing off a check batch and you're looking at Acumatica on one side and trying to work out, you're trying to reconcile as a CFO to make sure everything's correct and that you're paying the right amounts. And so we're like, this is a bit mad. And so what we've generated is the minute you create that payment batch in Acumatica, it automatically creates a payment cycle review in Trailed. So it actually connects every single supplier payment in that batch. Say you've got $1 million batch with 10 supplier payments, 100,000 each. What Trailed is then allowing the CFO to do is click a little icon and see all the invoices that are connected to that individual supplier payment. So we're basically creating a digital review. Instead of having to do things again at the end of the process with pen and paper, we're saying now you can see all the individual invoices that relate to each of the $100,000 payments, making up that $1 million payment batch. And you can see who approved it, whether it was three-way matched or it wasn't. You've got a trend in history and payment graph here to tell you whether it's an outlier or it's an increased supplier charge, and it's actually going to tell you whether it's a low risk payment or it's a high risk payment or it's a problem. So when I talk about paper and pen, we're not just removing it for the AP clerk, actually. We're also removing it for the senior financial directors who are sitting there with pen and paper at the end of the process saying, I've got a huge amount of payment here, a big payment here that I'm responsible for making. To be honest, my job's on the line if I make a mistake. So how do I make sure that it's all connected? And they're sitting there with pen and paper at the end and making sure they have all the invoices and trying to do it against each of the check runs. And we're trying to help them digitize and give them the visibility that they need to feel comfortable with what's happened further down the line.
That does bring up a user interface question that I have. Do you do anything in Acumatica, like with a customization project, or is the whole user interface that someone is living in trailed?
It's a really, really good question. In terms of a native integration, today everything is back-end integrated into Acumatica, so it's the user interface is in Trailed. We have, after the Acumatica Summit, I literally got on the phone with our CTO and I said, we need to make this native. We need to embed our URL into the bills and adjustment section, and we need to make this product native. And he said to me, I know. And we looked at it and I said, Luke, how much time is this going to take? And he said it's something we will have in 2024. We will have an embedded trail. Will no longer be external to Acumatica. It will be embedded in the bills and adjustment screen as a full capable functionality UI, but it will be the trailed UI which matches with the Angular platform that Acumatica is built in. So the answer to you, Tim, is today no. It's a separate UI capability. It sits separate to Acumatica as a product, but very shortly it'll still sit separate as a product, but it'll be embedded in an iframe inside of the Acumatica bills and adjustment section to operate. On one side of the screen, you'll have trailed, and on the other side of the bills and adjustment screen, you'll have your Acumatica bills and adjustments capability.
Interesting. And then I would assume you could still just work in trailed. I mean, some people might like that UI better, like the CFO might just want to go in there.
Absolutely. So it
Okay.
depends on what part of the business you're in. Like if you're a finance team, you're probably going to use it native in Acumatica because it's in one spot. If you're a CFO, you're probably going to go into the trailed notifications queue for your payments, and you can go in, you can review your batch file, you can approve it, and you can get it executed through to the bank.
Very cool. I think there's the technical chop surfacing again there. This is not a multi-year plan. You plan to have that done in 2024. That's really cool. So that does bring up a pricing question that I have. Acumatica's priced by instance, unlimited users. Do you guys follow that same pricing model, or how does it work for Trail?
We do. We absolutely don't want people limiting the number of users on the platform. We want you to have as many approvers and as many people leveraging and using the power of the platform as you can. So it is an unlimited user model. It's really driven on pricing based on invoice volume. So we don't do exactly what Acumatica do on number of pages. We actually say we don't care about how many pages you process in a single invoice. We have an invoice counter, and if you turn around and say I'm on 1,000 invoice per month package, and you do 3,000 pages, you're still being charged 1,000 invoices per month. So, yes, the answer is our pricing is volume and subscription based.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're counting the transactions, which is the same thing Acumatica does. They're counting the number of AP bills, although it's probably because they're using Microsoft's OCR engine, they have to, on the recognition side, they have to match their cost, number of pages. But it sounds like you do it. You're getting charged number of AP bills, just like the Acumatica licensing is for regular Acumatica.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. All
So
right. Fraud.
broadside.
I'll let you go. I know this is the passion. This is what I heard in May of 2022. And am
uh,
I describing it right? Like, okay, you're solving the problems that people know they have. When we transition to the fraud side, is this the problem they don't know they have? At least most people.
I don't know if they don't know they have it because there's so many customers. I mean, the FBI released a report late last year that talked about $8.3 billion lost through business email compromise. Right, when these were businesses right in the mid market, right in the operational space that we run and we work, and it was through one method, being business email compromise, tampering with invoices, making it look like they were coming from your CFO, saying to the AP team, "I need you to pay this urgently," it's really important. Can you get it sorted? And so, I don't know. There's this thing where it's like, do they know about it until they've had the incident? Probably not. But I do think senior people in the organization do think about this, before it happens, because it's just one of those things. So what I think generally is that if you've been impacted by business email compromise, or any inside or external fraud, you're probably going to be aware of it. If you haven't, it honestly, I think it's a matter of not if, it's a matter of when, unfortunately, given that where we're going with ChatGPT, impersonation, the way things are going out there, these fraudsters are getting pretty clever as to the way they're impersonating our suppliers, impersonating our staff, sitting in our emails for periods of time before they actually action anything. And what Trail's really designed around is, yes, that's what happened to our co-founders. And so we want to make sure that the business is not only just efficient, but we want to make sure that you've got financial control and it's secure and everything that you're paying, and that it's going to the right place. And so we're analyzing, all of the email metadata. So if you receive an invoice from a supplier, we're looking at all the email metadata. Where does that invoice come from? Is it unusual geolocation? Has the invoice fingerprint changed? Is it a different supplier document? We plumb into now a number of government data sources to check, things like, the validation of business registrations and things like that. Just to make sure that the people that you're paying and the supplier invoices that you're receiving are legitimate. And by the time that the CFO is sitting there with their check batch, they're actually just looking to essentially see all the invoices that are linked to the payments, but they're not concerned from a security perspective, because they can see this big green tick that each of these suppliers are verified by Trailed. They've been used on our platform before, and we know them. We know that they're legitimate and they're authentic to pay.
And so, yeah, I didn't know about the email metadata part, or I didn't remember that part. So, that would be a situation where instead of people emailing the accounts payable clerk their invoices, they're going to send it to ap@mycompany.com, and you're going to pick it up from there. And you're essentially, Trail is reading the emails, but it has access to way more information to know if those emails are legitimate or not.
Oh, absolutely. If we have the emails coming into Trailed, we capture all the email metadata from where the invoices have come from. We can analyze a huge amount of data from that as to whether it's legitimate or not, as well as analyzing, as I said, the fingerprint and layering. So we're doing natural language search, and we're looking at all the detail in the document, and we're layering it on top of each other to say, does this actually mirror the fingerprint for that supplier with what we would know that supplier fingerprint to be? So again, this comes, Tim, into that multi-tenant learning capability. If you get 1,000 Walmart invoices, they should all have the same, like we do when you go through customs, they should all have the same fingerprint. And if you receive an invoice on one of your tenants that looks different to that fingerprint, it's going to flag it. And whether that be because it's the email metadata is different, where it's come from, that might be one reason. It might be a material increase in supplier charges. It might be a duplicate payment. It might be a bank details change. It could be a myriad of different things. And these are the things that we're looking for, but we're doing it in real time instead of using humans. We're using AI to analyze and look at that using that multi-tenant learning.
That's huge. Yeah, so it sounds like then there's two pieces to it. One is like, and by the way, quick time check. Are we on time? No, we're a little over what we had scheduled. Are you
That's
okay on
okay.
time?
Yep.
You okay? All right, cool.
Yep.
So yeah, sounds like there's two pieces to it. One is it's looking at the mechanics of the email that came in and who it came from, et cetera. But then you mentioned it there. It's also looking at like more like the credit card thing that you brought up earlier, where somehow, I don't know how, but somehow my bank like can flag credit card charges that look weird. I'll just describe it that way. They look weird. And so your AI engine is not just looking at where the email came from, who it came from. Let's say it came from somehow they were able to spoof all of that. You're also then looking at, does this charge look weird? Is that a good way to say
That's exactly what it is. Like exactly what you have on your credit card is exactly what we provide in the bank in the AP space, right? So all the data's there in terms of what's normal for your business, right? You have transactional history in Acumatica. We have an understanding of what your normal spend is for those suppliers. Then you have all this external data that's coming in via the email metadata and the analysis. But then there's the cross-tenant learning. What does that supplier look like across 5 different vendors that use them on Trailed? Are you guys dealing with them in the same way? So the data that the banks use is the same. What does Tim Rodman normally do? What is his spend history? Does it look outside the norm in terms of where he's buying it, who he's buying it from? Is this in line with the timings that he would be awake, given it's 3 o'clock in the morning in Australia, but it's 9 o'clock in the morning in San Diego? Like, it's looking at all of these patterns and behavior through the accounts payable workflow to make sure that the business it's doing what it should be doing.
That part just gave me chills. So like now I understand why you get chills talking about this stuff. I think your wife is absolutely right. This stuff is boring, but for people like us, it does. I mean, she's right. Let's call it what it is. But it's real. It's a real problem, and the reason why that just gave me chills is, all right, you've ramped up to over 300 customers in a year and change, right? To your fraud pitch was like your real passion for what Trail, the problem you will be solving 5 to 10 years from now. And by gaining so many customers so quickly and really getting people in the door, now you really have a really compelling reason to get the next 300 because of what you just talked about there. Now your engine knows the more people you get on your platform, the more your engine knows about everyone who pays certain vendors. And there can't be that many suppliers in the United States, right? I mean, at a certain point, you're just hitting the same suppliers from different angles, right? And that brain right there, that proprietary brain, you didn't outsource it to some other AI engine, that you don't have control over. That proprietary brain that you built from a technology standpoint, where it gets really valuable is as you add
critical
customers, right?
critical mass, critical
That's
mass,
that's
because we
really
can
cool.
work together, and this is part of the community aspect of it. Yes, we can solve the AP efficiency problem better than anyone else, but we can also work together to solve the fraud problem. And then the more we work together to solve the fraud problem, the more secure all of our businesses are in making sure that we have an alignment of what's normal for that supplier and if it's normal for our business and what looks normal across the economy when paying that supplier and when dealing with that supplier. If we can work together to solve this problem, we're going to outflank these fraudsters and these hacksters that are embedding ChatGPT and all these different AI tools to try and defraud and take money away from the mid market.
Fighting AI with AI. I love it. So yeah, I just lost where I was going to go there. Okay, so critical mass. I got it back. So when I said earlier that this is a problem that people don't know they have, I like your response. You're right. They do know they have it. But would you say that maybe they don't really identify it as being an accounts payable problem? They identify it as being an IT problem, right? So like these phishing emails, this is something that we need to enhance our IT security, or we need to put this one really annoys me. You know, the Outlook message that you get whenever you get an email from outside your organization, like, okay, I know this person's outside my organization. Like, people are trying to solve the phishing problem, right? But they look at it as purely an IT problem, right?
Mm,
Whereas you're looking at it more holistically. Yes, you're looking at the email metadata, which is you're solving the IT problem in a better way than like a spam detector would, because you know more about the vendor than just is it a legitimate email sender, right? But then you're going further and you're looking at it just like a credit card company would. So those two things combined, I feel like is really powerful. But it's the problem people know they have, but they maybe don't look to their AP solution to solve it. They look to the IT department to solve it. Would you say that's a good way
mm.
of putting it?
I think so. Yeah, I think the AP team, unfortunately, it depends on the business. Really depends on the business. But if the AP person's trying to work out how do I make my process as efficient as possible, and it stops there. And then the IT person's trying to work out, well, does this software actually do what we want it to do, and what else does it do to help me do my job? And then the CFO is going, actually, I want the process efficient, but I don't want you to just pay everything. I want to have security and I want to have visibility. And so the product talks to all three different levels. And it's really funny. The more customers we've got, the more it starts with, depending on who it starts with, is where you start in the process. So if you start with an accounts payable person, they're all efficiency. How do I make this process easy and efficient and make my life easier? And you start with the CFO and they go, I get that the AP person wants to make their life efficient and easy, and so do I. But if I had to prioritize, I want the visibility and financial control at the same time. So great. If they have to do a tiny little bit more work, but we can get rid of 85% of it, that's perfect. That's exactly what I want. And then the IT person's turning around and saying, I just want to put in an application that's secure and that's within the infrastructure that I've got. And, does this do more than what I would expect another solution to do? And they're turning around and going, this is really cool. This is different. So I think you're right. I think it's yeah, maybe it's just not. It depends on who the person is in the organization, depending on whether they're thinking about this fraud piece as their problem or not their problem.
Yeah, so they all know they have the problem, but they might all be using three different ways to solve that problem, right? I mean, there's probably software that solves the IT side, software that solves the AP side only, make things more efficient, software that helps the CFO, like from a reporting standpoint, but you're coming across all three layers, solve it from all three angles.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, Adam, I know we're over time here. That I don't want to take away from any other cool stuff you have going on. Is there? Did we hit the fraud piece substantially enough for you?
I think we did. Look, it is it's a thing that's happening. We want to try and help customers solve it. We're here to support, Acumatica sites. I've lived and breathed Acumatica since 2013. Not quite as long as Tim, but
No, same year for
Ah,
me. Yeah,
good.
I
Yeah, and
remember.
and the community is special, right? We want to do this together, and the community is special. And I think it's something that's very unique about Acumatica is that you build friends out of this thing. It's not just about business and making new sales and building sites, and it's really about how do we do this thing together. And I think that's really exciting about being in this space. And thank you, Tim, so much, and all the customers that have trusted in us to try and solve this problem for them. We're delighted to be here and to support the outcomes that you guys are trying to derive in your mid market business.
Yeah, and the passion you have for this, and I think you used the phrase "near and dear to your heart" earlier. Would you say a lot of it does have to do with it being mid market? Like you're not helping companies, like public companies, just become ginormously more profitable. You're helping like a lot of family businesses and support more families. Would you say that's a piece of why it matters to you?
That's where it started. I mean, this business was built on an agriculture company, producing. Our first site was in agriculture. It was a family business. They were producing pork and chicken distribution, and they had this problem. Like they had the efficiency and they had the control problem, and so it's always started in the mid market. And it's the businesses that don't have 15 people in the finance team. It's the businesses that have two people or one person in the finance team that really need this support and help. And that's what the product was built for, not for your Nasdaq listed 100 companies. It's just not. It was never designed for that.
Yeah, I think you have more soul working in the mid market, right? Like you might make more money working in the tier one space, but like your soul doesn't get robbed as much as in mid market because yeah, the companies you're helping are just more down to earth. Yeah, not as corporate. That's got to be fun. So yeah, awesome. So I've seen also I want to mention I've seen like a number of Indeed posts for Trailed. Seems like you guys are growing not just your customers but obviously your team. You live now in Southern California, if I'm correct on that. I mean, you have it's amazing what you guys have done the last couple of years. I mean, you're here in the U.S. and it's land and expand. You're in expand mode. Would that be a good way to put it?
Absolutely. Look, we're looking for amazing people that are really passionate about the mid market, to come and join us on the journey. We've got roles across sales, engineering, product, tech, and we really want the people that are going to be along for the ride with us. Like it's been a really exciting journey to see all these Acumatica sites all over the world, see the benefits of what we're trying to do here. And we love what we do. And so if you want to join, something that's really changing the world, and I feel like it is. I feel like we are changing the world. We're not, we're not solving, poverty and world health, but we are solving a big part of the world and what we do in our segment. So, if you're interested in trying to do something really exciting, reach out, and I'd be happy to put you in touch with the right person.
Yeah, and I'll just say I think you can change the world and be boring at the same time. I think that's they can both coexist.
I'm gonna let my wife know about that.
Well, hey Adam, great to talk to you today. Anything else that we missed? Any other closing? Anything else? I think we rounded it out well. But what do you think?
No, I think that's perfect. Well, thank you so much, Tim, and for being part of the community and doing what you do. We wouldn't be like we are without you in this forum. So thank you for just spending your time doing this. Like, I know this is outside of your normal day job, say it, and we this is part of the community. So thank you for just being you and doing this for the Acumatica users. So really really hats off for having me on, and appreciate you running this podcast.
Awesome. Great to chat with you, and I look forward to seeing what you guys do in 2024.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. See you, everyone.
All right. Well, that's it for now. We'll catch you on the next episode of ogforums.com Real Talk. Thanks for listening, and take care.